Live, live. So new episode of the Shuffle Bus. Yeah, that's my best I got today. I am so tired today, dude. My Jack decided that it was party time at 3 a.m. last night, even though he's been sleeping through the night most nights. So
Jack is the coolest kid in school.
I know.
3 a.m. party time.
Yep. So, since you were a scrub and had no internet for last week, we have to.
I have good internet now. Now I have internet. I have powerful
internet. Let me go share this with the Ashes world that we're live, really fast here. I'm excited. Like, I don't think I can lose the Ash Techie tournament now. I'm the only 4-0 in the tournament. My last opponent was a 3-1, so there is going to be, or a 2-1, and I was 3-0. So there is going to be another 3-1 player. I guess, like, in theory, I probably will play that person. And it's potentially possible.
How many players were there?
10. I wish they'd have just.
And how many rounds?
Ended up being 5. I wish they'd have done 4.
Okay, then it's possible that the pairings will just get jacked up because everybody's played everybody.
Yeah.
So you might play like a 2-2 or a 1-3 just because pairings don't work otherwise.
Right.
Because that's too many rounds for 10 players.
Yeah,
but again, this tournament is specifically to test the program, not to be competitive. So don't feel too bad about that. But yeah, if you're 4-0, you would go to 3-1 or go to 4-1. So if there is a 3-1, it's possible they would catch you.
Right.
But like in a 5-round 10-player tournament, there's just no way to figure out tiebreakers.
Well, I'm pretty happy because I've been like what I wanted to take advantage of in this tournament. Like my goal in this tournament was beyond just helping out and testing Ash Techie, which by the way has gotten really good over the last 5 weeks. Like huge props to Dijon and 4649 Matt is helping him with it, and a couple of other guys have sort of stepped up and helping.
Great. I mean,
I've had
that's
very
awesome
little
that it was successful from a technical point of view and from a like marketing point. Like I don't know if marketing is the right word, but just like eyes on it.
Yeah.
From the community.
I think it was just it was and like they've made so many great changes. But also just like some of the stuff that just wasn't working is now working. There's still a few like fringe cases where, stuff that wasn't working in some of our games when we first started playing. I haven't like had that scenario come back up to try again. But I think the last game we only had 2 manual modes in the last game, and both of them were basically because player choice was wrong. Right? Like I was like, no, I actually wanted to do this, and it instead with Phoenix Born or whatever.
Right. The inheritance thing still didn't work right, but it's possible that's fixed now.
Well, I had it work. So I played a version of your Mayoni deck that we had been testing with when we were just playing test games, and I had it work every time. It triggered every time.
Maybe they fixed it then.
What I had a bigger issue with Gilder in particular was when you summoned a Gilder into a full battlefield, whether or not it would do the one ping damage. And I didn't get to test that in my game yesterday, just because it just didn't come up, right? Like it just wasn't a situation that came up. So wasn't able to see if that was working yet as a whole. I do think that the Reborn damage rule set and Ash Techie don't quite jive 100% yet. And so I'll be curious to see how it impacts cards like Molten Gold when they finally get to it. And, some of those like Shadow Hounds and how Shadow Hounds work. Because it's not really set up in a way where it can pause resolution of a card to change the game state. And I think that's going to be really difficult for them to fix and get working correctly. But I do think they'll eventually get there. It's just that the framework from coming over from... Because it came over from Jinteki, which is a Netrunner framework, and it came from the Crucible, which was a Keyforge one, and both of those games don't have this weird like I don't know what I would call it. Like it's basically paused game state, right? When like when something dies or something triggers in the middle of the resolution of a card effect, the card doesn't resolve off the stack, if you will, before those triggered effects stack. So we'll see. We'll see how that works when they get into some of the more complex designs that exist in the game. But I have no doubt that they'll get it figured out. They seem to be really well motivated. They've got Leo fully up and running now, which Anguish was apparently a pretty tricky card for them.
Yeah, I bet.
So they now claim that Leo is fully ready to be used in the mod. So that now brings 3 extra PBs on. So 9 of the 21 PBs are online now. I don't know what the next. They're going in order of release, so I don't know when the next one is going to come out, right? Like I don't have any idea on that side, but yeah, it's just going to be what it'll be. While we're waiting here just for a few minutes, we did get a couple of follows over the last week. This was really some of my closer like contacts within a channel on Facebook called Nebraska Gamers, and it's really dedicated to video gamers and stuff. But I did throw into the ring like we're a tabletop gaming stream, and so a couple of people decided to follow us, and so a big shout out to the 402 grind for that. And,
yeah, that's awesome.
And then also my good friend Eric Neo Suicide followed us. He's also a Twitch streamer and streams Genshin Impact. And man, Eric, I'm so sorry, bud. But anyways, you should follow Neo Suicide if you like Genshin Impact. Eric is just a super awesome.
I heard that game's super sweet.
I like have become more and more interested in it over time. But I also
it's like. At least I heard that it was like Zelda Breath of the Wild, except like anime characters.
Yes, that's what I heard as well. And it's very sandbox style game, and it also scares me because I think it's the kind of game that potentially I could get sucked into for hundreds and hundreds of hours, and that usually means that I'm giving up some other sort of gaming habit in order to play a game like that. So I tend to
hundreds and hundreds of hours doesn't compute with your like 6-month-old child.
Well, that's just exactly it, right? Like I get, I've been playing Warframe now for about, I'm going to go on saying, let's call it about almost a year now. Not quite, but shortly after the pandemic started, I started playing Warframe, right? And in a year, I've played 160 hours in a year, right? Which is quite a bit. Like not a small amount. And that game is so involved and so grindy. Like when you start talking about like the high end like end game type stuff for it, that I don't think I can progress any further. Right? Like I don't think I can actually progress any further. Like sure
I have a bunch of friends that think that game is really awesome.
I think it's great.
I've never played. The idea of it is cool to me.
Yeah, I think
it has like a reputation of being kind of like a pay to win.
Well,
right?
I'll explain what you can call pay to win if you want to. So roughly quarterly, they have what they call Prime Access, right? And it's $80 for a quarter, which is kind of expensive, right? Like it's not.
That's
cheap.
More than. Well, I guess like PS5 games and Xbox, whatever the new Xbox is called, games are $70 now. So it's not like out of the range of one of those, but like if you buy one of those, you get it the whole time, right? Like forever.
Right. And you don't have to spend the money because all of those things are grindable in the game. It just takes a very long time, right? Like it takes a very long time and a lot of gameplay to earn those things through regular gameplay. And they still incentivize you a little bit to buy the Prime Access because then they give you like a whole bunch of the premium currency, which honestly just speeds up your entire progression quite a bit because there's a trade, there's there's an auction house trade house type of scenario. Like you can buy the mods that you would spend God knows how many hours farming because it's a less than 1% drop rate from this one place, right? So like you're going to run like 100 runs in order to get it, and each run takes you 15 minutes. You can figure out how long that takes you to probably get it. And when you talk about probabilities and over-unders, like it's potentially possible that it could take you 200 runs to get that 0.5% drop rate item, right? So, you know, the fact that the platinum can then be spent to buy mods that would be really difficult normally to farm has a benefit. But it does get to a point where you get far enough into the game where you have sort of all of the baseline components and gear. And so then you're kind of like, okay, well, now if I earn something that's worth something on the auction house, like I'm starting to actually make platinum back and I don't have to spend platinum any longer. And I don't have to necessarily go buy the prime accesses. But there is benefit. There is that pay to win component of like buy the prime access and you get the latest prime warframe and prime the weapon kit that comes with that warframe and blah 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 blah. There's also like some components of the game are pretty grindy, so you get to a point where you're like, okay, well I've got some platinum and I get a daily reward to have 75% off a market purchase, and so then I'll use platinum to buy the frame that I would spend 30 hours grinding, right? But again, that's just like an economy in the game. It's not really necessarily pay to win.
Right. I wasn't like, I just don't know because I've never played it.
No.
And I have a lot of friends that play it like not spending money on it and have a ton of fun.
Sure.
I just like when I have approached people to play it, it's been like, we don't want to do that because it's pay to win. And
well, to be fair, I mean, there's no competitive side to it. They have like a PvP arena, but like nobody in the community actually bothers with it. Like nobody plays it. Like everybody plays just the PvE components of the game, right? It's basically like, to me, it's what Destiny should have been. Does that make sense? Like Destiny is really good, and I like Destiny because the stats come from the guns and all of these things. But what Warframe does really nicely is like, you craft everything in Warframe. There's like basically no drops, right? You just get crafting materials for runs. It feels a lot more like you're playing like a version of EVE Online, where everything is just like get your materials and then like you might have to go grind for a blueprint, but you get the blueprint and now you can craft this gun, right? And the gun is identical for anybody that has it. Whereas like Destiny is like, well, okay, cool. I got this awesome sniper rifle, right? But because I didn't get a specific role on it, it's not anybody spending $80 a quarter on a game. Big Fleet says anybody spends $80 a quarter on a game is probably going to beat me at it anyway. Yeah, I mean you're probably right, but because it's not competitive, like it only sort of reinforces the public, like the pub options of the game. So what I mean by that is like, if I get into just a rando group, right? If somebody is a whale in that rando group, it only makes our group stronger because they've got like all the best stuff. And that's cool. Like that makes it easier to sort of carry the squad, if you will. And it's just, for anybody else, it's just a time sink, right? And so like I said, when I talk about progression and getting like continuing to make progression, I really struggle with it because I can only get maybe 6 to 7 hours a week maximum on it. And so that's like nothing, right? It's just absolutely nothing in this game for the grind. So the grind is real. And I think that's a turnoff for some people. But I think the process of...
It's just a taste thing. There are lots of people that like really grindy games, right? Like,
absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
RuneScape is a thing that people still play. So...
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally with you. Like, I agree. It is just purely a taste thing. And so if we're really talking about it, I think for a free-to-play game, it's one of the best free-to-play games I've ever played. And I've played quite a few. Like, I mean, mostly they come in from the mobile realm, right? But I've played things like Raid Shadow Legends, and I've played hundreds and hundreds of hours of Raid Shadow Legends to the point where I had a team that was nearly 3 keen in the Ultra Nightmare boss, which is, if you know Raid Shadow Legends, is basically like top tier, top tier. You don't get much better than that. And I haven't spent a ton of money in Raid. I probably spent less than $100 in Raid, but played it over 2 years to do that, to get to that point. And like the reality of it is that like Warframe is not any different than that. Only I would say that in Raid, there are just times when you are not going to get the best thing if you don't put money into the game. Like, it's just not going to happen, right? Like, can you still get competitive things and still do all of this stuff? Yeah, sure. But I mean, it's just a matter of how long it's going to take to do it compared to the alternative. So, like, I think Warframe is a really good example of free to play. And then they really do a nice job because every single, like, four times a week. 4 or 5 times a week. I don't remember exactly. Sorry, I don't get on every one of them, but they have a community stream with like their community teams for the different platforms. So like they have the lead for the community team for the Xbox, and lead for the PS4, and lead for the Switch, and lead for the PC. So it's 4 times a week, and they Twitch stream for an hour throughout the week. And if you follow their Twitch channel and you watch their stream for 30 minutes, they give you free stuff in the game, like cosmetics, and sometimes it's not cosmetics, sometimes it's a gun, sometimes, you know what I mean? Like, it's, so those are all kind of really cool engagement things that they're doing.
Twitch has definitely changed multiplayer games like that dramatically.
Yeah, for sure.
Like the advent of Twitch drops has made game engagement and Twitch engagement go up 1,000 jillion %.
Yep. And I would say if you like shooters and you like sci-fi shooters, like Warframe is a really good sci-fi shooter. I think it's my favorite sci-fi shooter from a pure mechanical perspective is still Anthem. Everything else with Anthem is completely screwed up and terrible. But
right. I heard that they're shutting that down, actually.
Yeah, I don't think that the 2.0 version is going to ever see the light of day. I just don't think I think they had their shot and they missed it.
That was so sad because that game looks so sweet.
First off, Anthem is gorgeous from a visual perspective. One of the best looking games I've played this year. But, and I'm going to say but here, its combat system was amazing. Like, it was so fluid, right? Like, this ability to move from being on the ground and into the air and doing combat damage, and like just the transitions and the mechanical flow of the combat was easily some of the best shooter combat I've ever had played. Period. No question in my mind. Everything else was wrong with it. It didn't have enough drops. It didn't have the right drop rates. It didn't have enough stuff to do. There was no end game plan for it, right? And like, because it didn't have an end game plan, they also didn't have enough content to like buy themselves enough time to make an end game plan before it was like, oh crap. And early on, like legendaries, like a legendary drop was like 1 out of 100 runs kind of thing, and then it was all randomized rolls, and it suffered from the original like Diablo 3 problem. And if anybody doesn't know, like early Diablo 3, like you could get Witch Doctor, like just as an example, you could get Witch Doctor like armor that would roll with strength. And obviously that is just a dead piece of gear for that Witch Doctor, right? Because there's nothing on that piece of gear that you're going to wear for your actual class. So Anthem suffered from that same problem where like you would just get rolls on legendary gear for class specific items that it wouldn't roll with stats that were relevant to the class. And so it just was a dead piece of equipment. And if you made 100 runs of the same dungeon and got that one item and then it was useless, it felt pretty bad, man. It felt pretty bad. So,
right.
But that being said, Warframe has none of those problems. Like it just doesn't have any of them. Like, but it's the second closest game in my opinion, like from a gameplay flow perspective, like the ability to, bullet jump and move through a level with a lot of speed, and then have like this interaction between gunplay and melee combat, and have it done really fluid and nice. Like it's pretty good. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty fun to play.
The thing that and I don't know how much this is true because I have never played the game or watched the game played. I've only like had secondhand tales.
Sure.
But that there was like a mode where you had to like crew a spaceship.
Yes, railjack.
And like every person had like different jobs.
Yes.
And that sounds awesome to me. Like
the railjack is really good if you have a squad that can play
Well,
consistently.
yeah, obviously it's team oriented because each person has to like hold
It's
up their
it's literally
part
the
of the
worst.
crew.
It's literally the worst game mode if you do not.
Well, okay,
It's
but
awful to just try to play it randomly like
those are the
that.
kinds of things that I like. Like I try to
Sure.
convince my like uh gaming group and my D&D group both to play like Star Trek fleet thing
Fleet battles, yeah.
where you like you're just like on the bridge of like the Enterprise. It's not the actual Enterprise, but you're just
Right.
like on the bridge of a Star Trek starship, and everybody has their like job at their post, and
Yeah.
like
I
I think
mean,
that sounds cool to me. But obviously, you have to have friends or
yeah, if you were a solo gamer, Warframe's still playable as a solo gamer, but Railjack is not. That part of the game is definitely not. I will say, like, they have done a lot of great things to it over the course of now. It's almost 8 years that I think it's been around. So you can feel what is the old content versus the new content at this point, because they're just like design shops have grown. You know what I mean? And so it's like there's much more interesting things going on in the new content than there is in any of the old content. But I mean, what is that not true of like every game when you really think
oh
about
yeah,
it? Yeah. So like I don't think that's a knock. That's just talking about like what to expect. So, but
right.
anyways, I digress. We've gone off on a massive tangent that has nothing to do with tonight's stream. But
You
uh,
should blame all your new followers that from their video game stream for sending us off the rails.
the bus has gone off the road, everybody. It has gone off the road. But we're back with Ashes Reborn again tonight. You know, I've been playing a lot of Ashes. Brian B managed to punish me pretty substantially in a couple of matches on Friday night during the Friday first 5 Fridays. If you're not doing that in the community, I'm telling you, it's awesome. Like it's essentially the Ashes version of Friday Night Magic, and you get to play different Ashes players of various skill levels, and people will help you either build a deck, or you can play with a recon deck or a pre-constructed deck. I mean, you know, everybody sort of finds a home to play Ashes the way they want to play Ashes. And on average, they're probably getting 10 to 12 players to show up every Friday night. So this is kind of like creating a version of the local game night. And you know what I think is so great about this is I think even after the pandemic is over, I'm hoping that this sort of online First Fridays type community can exist, because uh, I just think it's, you know, with a game like Ashes, one of the hardest things is actually building a community and having a consistent community to play the game with, and it can get pretty frustrating if that doesn't build up. And this is just a great outlet for that. So, you know, huge. Huge thank you to Chaos Theory, and I'm trying to think of there's another player, and I'm sorry I'm forgetting your name right now, that helped set that up, because I think it's great to see a casual Ashes night come out, because it just gives me a chance to play with stuff that probably wouldn't make the cut in a competitive environment, but you still want to see if it's cool and fun, and you just want to have some fun. And you know, I played Brian B, who's obviously I would think, one of the top 5 Ashes players for sure this last week. And Brian and I had a very tense game where my Shadowhound deck that we've been playing on stream nearly got there, and it was against Cole. And I think in the end, I just wasn't being aggressive enough with my hounds. And he was playing not only the 300 blades, um, you know, Cole cards, but he was also playing 3 Mist Typhoons in his deck. And so it's really hard, I think, for the Shadowhound deck to win against 6 sweepers. It's just really hard. I did manage
Yeah,
to.
it sucks. I mean, you just kind of break even then, right? Because when you activate Hound, you end up, you know, you spend 3 dice. I guess when it comes to those sweepers like that, the actual like dice parity becomes a little weird, because he might pick off some extra dudes from you besides just the
Correct. Yeah,
um
that's what happened. And it's also just a situation where um like he was just punishing me with Salamander Monk and Strengthen. Like just punishing me, right? Just turning the Salamander Monk into a 3/1 over and over and over again. And you just sit there and you go, huh, he spent one dice and whatever it costs to play strengthen the first time. I think it's two dice to play the strengthen, right? To make a 3-1, which is on par with the hound. It doesn't have the hound trigger, but it doesn't really matter because you're still like, do I really want to trade my hound or, because it's Cole. So remember, none of my other units are really going to stick, right? And so, you're left with this hound that Cole can't target, and it's like, do you use the hound to defend yourself or just take the 3? And so you just start trading like body blow after body blow, like 3s and 3s, like over and over and over again. But he just has the advantage of like sweeping my board away over and over and over again. And I managed the particle shield he played 3 sweepers in the game, and I managed the particle shield the hound twice out of 3 times and still didn't win.
Wow.
But I think it was just because I was too conservative with the hound, right? At the end of the day, I should have just been pressuring my opponent's board with hound and letting him slash the hound instead of like giving him this state where it was profitable to 2-for-1 me with 100 blades or with Mr.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think against Cole, because he has the 100 blades, and specifically like if you, I don't know how many games you played or whatever. If you knew he had the Mist Typhoons.
No, I didn't know. Yeah, we just played one. So I didn't know the. But I just think it was a learning lesson for me on how to play Hound into Cole specifically.
Right. You just it turns into like activate book, deal 2 damage, then next turn deal 3 damage, and they discard a card.
Yep.
Right, like.
And then I got a chance to play a new member of the community, Ogre Yama. I don't know if he's on stream with us tonight or not, but he's new-ish, and I say new-ish. He played Ashes 1.0 up until right around the Sympathy Divine releases, the Song of Soaksend, and I don't remember what the other one was called now. I'm sorry, my name's blanking, but and so he is just coming back to Ashes with the announcement of Reborn. And so he had built a Koji Creepers deck, and I played that with my Rin Mounts deck, and very, very close game, very, very tight game, but ultimately the Creepers just eventually out advantaged my like recurring Raptor.
It seems hard for you to keep up with the Creepers. Like,
well, I actually did a really good job through most of the game, and it really did come down to at the end of the game, like, I helped him see how it would play, right? Because he thought he was dead on board, and I'm like, you're not dead on board, and I'll explain why. And so I actually showed him how to beat me, because again, new players learning the rules, trying to learn new Reborn, like how it goes. And I said, all you have to do is attack with this Law of Lions. Is it Jaw of the Lion? Maybe it's Law of Lions, but anyways, yeah, you might be right, Cam. Anyways, it was a situation where I said, because I'm at 4 life and you have 2 creepers on the board right now, you just attack me and you force. I have to block one of them, and that means that the one that I block with it, I have to counter, and because I counter, I don't have the opportunity to swing back for the kill, and you make a. You're able to make a quote unquote. Seedling from that, because I have to block the creeper and counter kills the creeper, right? And then because you still have Koji side action up, you can Koji the seedling to take it up to 3 life, and I don't have a 3 life unit. All I got left is a winged lioness with 2 life or 2 attacks, so I can't kill the seedling. And then you've got I forget what the other card was he had, but it would allow him to put the last counter on it, right? And so by doing that, he'd be able to make the 2/3/2s, and now I'm at 2 life with 2/3/2s and only 1 defender. And so it basically turns into I can't stop the last 3/2, so you win. But it's, again, three rounds to get to that point, or 3 turns to get to that point, right? And so, so it was just really about showing him how the combat rules worked and why that was his best play in that scenario, even though he thought he was dead, because I was showing a Ceratosaurus mount and a Frostfang with Frostfang with root armor on it, and he didn't see how he was going to beat me through that scenario because he was at 3 life, and so if he attacked, like he thought if he attacked he was going to lose, and if I made the seedlings, like I just still had the ability to play another winged lioness, and so he thought, well, I'm only going to make get to this point, and you've got 4 life, and so I said, yeah, at the end of the day, like you had to become the aggressor in that scenario, and he just didn't see it, right? So again, shout out to him. It was awesome. I
'Cause if he hadn't played since before Reborn,
yeah,
the like it would have been very different if you could block and not counter, right? Like, and then you would kill him.
right, because that's exactly right. If I could have just stood the Ceratosaurus mount in front of my Ceratosaurus mount had an ice buff on it, so it actually had 4 life as well. But if I could have stood the Ceratosaurus mount in front of one of his creepers, and stood the Frostfang in front of one of his creepers, and not countered, like I just win the game then, right? Like that you can't make that attack, so that would turn into a stalled board state, right? So, yeah, it's just how the game works. So I think it was just a really good example of how the combat changes really make the game that much better, and obviously teaching a player coming from
it stops the games from that's a perfect example of the states they didn't want, where like you can't attack because your opponent just like blocks and their guys don't die,
right,
and then vice versa, like you probably can't attack if he just doesn't attack,
right,
and then we get in these long like do nothings,
right. But I will tell you, like against that deck, Frostfang with root armor was a pretty sticky unit. There was just very few ways to kill it because he didn't have like direct board removal stuff.
That thing like blocks the lizard for free, right? Like
it does. It actually can block the. It can actually block the Brilliant Thorn as well, and only take 1 damage. And because it has Recover 1 on it, like essentially it gets back to 0. So it was just like my best defensive unit on my board, like over and over and over again, which was kind of interesting.
Nature doesn't have like non-damaged based removal, so
right, that's right. And so just a double armored Frostfang's pretty good against that sort of thing. You really are looking at like needing to sort it, needing to use illusion like a fade away, something like that. I mean, so it narrows the card pool down pretty substantially. But okay, so I mean, let's talk. That was kind of my week of Ashes. I know you didn't get much in, Neil, just because you were dealing with internet troubles and things of that nature. But
I had internet outages all weekend, and it was not ideal.
So, but we were going to talk last Thursday about this, but because Neil couldn't join us on stream, I just built decks on stream last week. Let's talk about the preview article that came out last Thursday, which showcased the Time Magic ability, and then also gave us a preview ally. Yeah, you definitely can. That Molten Gold would be the literal only answer to the Frostfang double root armor, without a doubt. What you kind of have to get into though is like, if you have a double armored Molten Gold, you would deal only 1 damage, right? Because you're going to deal 3, and it's going to prevent 2.
Because it puts wounds on it, doesn't deal damage.
Oh, that's right.
So it goes through the armor.
That's right. It just passes through armor. That's exactly right. Yep, you're correct. So thank you for that. I appreciate the reminder text on the Molten Gold. So Time Magic, this is pretty cool. Like we finally got to see what Time's going to do, and
this is super exciting. By the way, we're just talking about creepers.
Right. I mean, creepers gotta love Time, right? Like,
nope. I think that's like the first thing everyone thinks, and then you realize it says it can also remove them. So now creepers are double dead.
So you can just fight the creeper too. If creeper turned into a legitimate like tier deck, like then Time Magic is a perfect counter to it.
So just as a start, when Time comes out, it's gonna be played. I think not only are the cards good, but everybody will be excited about this shiny new thing.
Yep.
So if your deck relies on having status counters, like it's very and obviously like if you have Time Magic and they have Time Magic, you're just trading side actions.
Right.
But that's not actually getting you anywhere.
Right.
Because if you're playing creepers and you have a seedling or whatever, like they get to remove a counter and then attack it. You can never like save up counters on it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we have to feel pretty bad for Mayone's Silver Snake. Yeah, Dragon says weaken those snakes. I think time really just takes away Snake as even being remotely competitive. I think it's fringe competitive right now, and unfortunately, I think that time magic is going to be really punishing to a Snake overall. But I also think it just says that angry Snake, yeah, big fleet for sure, angry Snake. But I think that it also hurts Squall Stallion, right? Like Squall Stallion is not competitive at all, and now it's just like super dead, right? Like, I mean,
Squall Stallion has status counters. I don't even know what that card does because I don't think it's very good.
So Squall Stallion is when you torrent you. Well, let me pull it out. I want to make sure I'm not. Maybe I'm thinking of the old version.
You might be right. I actually do not know what that card does. Sorry, chat.
So Squall Stallion is Torrent 1. Place one card from your hand on the top and bottom of your dry pile. If you do, place one status token on all Squall Stallions you control. So again, it Squall Stallion's slow enough that time magic can really just sort of mess it up its whole day up. And
right. I mean, the first Squall Stallion loses to time magic pretty bad, I think. But as soon as if you get two of them in play, I think you're winning because you're trading like side action to get two counters for side action to remove one.
Sure. I think it's really hard because there's not a consistent way to make two Squall Stallions other than like having two books or Fiona.
Right. I mean, like I said, I don't think that card's very good. I do think it's very cool. Super. Like that's kind of like you were talking about more casual deck that I would want to play on a Friday night Ashes. But in general, your status, like your things that require a threshold of status counters are going to be much worse.
Sure.
And your things that require a number of status counters, like Snake, where it doesn't really matter how many it has. It's just you're making it one smaller.
Right.
Which it's like you turn against Snake, you're like turning your time power into a charm power. In that case, it's like very fair. And if you're time versus time, you're probably fine. But things like seedlings, I think because it's like a threshold where you have to get to, it's not going to be
right. And
that's good.
Just Cam says I think snakes.
Maybe I'm wrong.
Just Cam says I think snakes can ultimately not care. I'm paraphrasing here because we got a small typo, but ultimately not care too much about the power once it gets to a large number. I agree, Cam, that if we're talking about like a 6 attack snake, right? Like we got 6 status tokens on snake, time doesn't matter. But when you talk about snakes sort of building momentum, like that, there's a big difference between a 1 status token snake and a 2 status token snake, and you can keep it down, and an even bigger difference from 2 status to 3. So like, I think you can,
3 is a big number.
So I think you can really keep the snake contained, if you will, through time magic. And now whether or not that's worth constantly spending your power dice on sort of depends on what else we're doing with our deck, right? But if we're really like thinking about, okay, I'm expecting status token play, or you look at a deck that has status token play, like you may be able to forego other time things to just use time power to keep those status token units at bay and do whatever the rest of your deck is doing without the assistance of time.
On a more general note, I think that the time power is very cool, and it's like an excellent power dice.
Yeah.
Not necessarily it's not like an amazing power. It's not like ceremonial or divine or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's good and it's unique, and at least from the cards that we've seen, which we're about to talk about, the time cards are going to deal with status tokens, so it'll be very flavorful and
Right.
like good utility use of your dice.
And Dragon says a focused book snake versus unfocused book snake. You're right, Dragon. I should preface that, but I think that in my opinion, so far in Snake Land that I've played snakes, even in my Azteki like master set only, I didn't play multiple snake books. Like I think, there is value to it, but I think you're really
what does the additional? What does the focus do? Puts counters on it.
Focus 1 puts 1 status on it. Focus 2 puts 2 status counters on it. And then if you already have the snake in play, you can just recast the snake, and because the book is focusing, you can put 2 status counters on your snake. So like if you were to focus 2 a book, you could essentially spend 6 dice to get 6 counters on your snake in 1 round. Like you could do that, right? Because you could cast it 3 times to get 6 counters. I'm not disagreeing with that, but I traditionally haven't found myself wanting to commit the slots of my deck to that.
One issue with Snake specifically, when we're talking about time dice, is that Snake already requires 2 colors, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like you're like splashing those 2 colors to play your snake, and then you're heavy in time, so you have like time dice to put counters on your snake.
Mm-hmm. That
seems less efficient. Though, again, we don't know what the time cards are, so if the time cards are all really good, you're probably fine doing that.
Mm-hmm. But Gorinsky is asking, how does this dice power compare to cards already in the pool that create status tokens? And the second part of his question is, does it make them obsolete? Do you want to take a stab at this first, Neil, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I can answer. Like, okay. I can give my opinion. Answer is probably not the right word because we're all talking in hypotheticals, not knowing what the actual card pool looks like. So that's an interesting question because right now there are a certain number of cards that all they do is put status tokens on. I think those are worse.
You think Explosive Growth is worse?
No.
Okay.
Because Explosive Growth isn't one that only puts status counters on.
Sure.
So the cards that put status counters on and do something else, that's a different story. Because if you're playing those cards, you obviously want to do that action. So cards like Empower, cards like Explosive Growth, like you're saying, that have additional utility kind of make up for the loss of efficiency, because obviously the time power dice is going to be the most efficient way to put a counter on besides Koji activation, like Koji Phoenixborn power, because it uses up a side action only and 1 dice. And I think, I don't know this off the top of my head, but I think all the other ones are more than 1 dice.
Yeah, and I'm just looking
put them on. So
right now for anything that interacts with status tokens.
So I think that cards like the one that is like put a status counter on 3 of your guys, I think that's worse than a time dice activation, barring some combo with time cards that comes out that like you want to get the 3. But with the current card pool, I think time status dice is better than that.
Yep.
And so to answer your question, I think 90% of the time, yes, time dice is better. Though the cards will still be in the pool, and the cards will still do the other things that you want them to do. Like, if you're playing Explosive Growth, you're not playing it because you want the status counters. Like, obviously, you're playing a deck that has synergy with the status counters, or you'd be playing a different pump spell.
Right.
But, like, you want that effect in your pile. And having the time dice doesn't, just do that verbatim.
And JustCam makes a great point here. He says, I like the time power to turn off key cards at certain times during a game. Example, Guilt Link. I definitely think Guilt Link is the loser of all losers against time.
That is actually a really good point. All the cards, all the stacking ready spells that don't get more than 1. Like the Chance and Guilt Link, all of those are are hurt because what's your opponent going to do? You like using Guilt Link as an example. I attack you with my guy and deal damage to your Phoenixborn.
Right.
I have not done a side action yet, and I have a time dice available. Like, I guess you put the counter on and make me do it.
Yep.
Like,
and what it really does is it makes sure that you're never in a board state where you're going to get guilt linked in an unfavorable fashion, right? Because if you're still playing like
it's doing that specific action is actually probably profitable for the person with the guilt link because I'm going to take the damage anyway. I'm going to get a counter, and you're going to spend a dice for my no cards, no dice.
Right.
Just 2 damage. Like, I'm essentially like, taking the power of your creature to make you lose a time dice. However, there will be board states where it's a gigantic blowout.
Correct.
Because you really want to guilt link me, but you can't.
Right. And those are the kinds of situations where like your only unit left on the board is like a master vampire, right? And your opponent's like sitting there with like an exhausted raptor herder or something, and you go, oh, okay, well, like this is clearly Guilt Link City, right? But like if you just time that away, then nothing happens, right? So I do think that those kinds of ready spells with single target counters are really hurt by the time dice power.
Yeah, I after like actually talking it out myself, I think that Guilt Link is the one that gets blasted the worst. Mm-hmm. Because when you think about like Chant of Worship or Chant of Revenge, a lot of times I would like specifically Chant of Revenge because the ability is so kind of like weak. I would definitely like if I could choose to make you spend a dice to remove the counter off my Chant of Revenge, I'd always do it.
Oh, of course, yeah, for sure.
So
like Chant is like, not impactful enough for the status counter.
But like Chant of Worship, it gets a little hairier because sometimes I would like to draw a card more than I would want you to spend a dice. It obviously it just comes down to specific game state, but time dice makes those work. Like, what does the time dice say? Can I just put a counter on my Guilt Link? Because if that's the case, then maybe Guilt Link doesn't lose at all.
You could definitely put a counter on your Guilt Link. It just says.
So there's the other side of it there, where we're not just talking about it getting.
I'm sorry, it's target unit. It does say target unit. It doesn't say put a status token on a card you control. So you can only do the status tokens on units, and you can only remove the status.
So you can't remove from.
So it actually, this whole conversation, forget it all. Forget it all.
Right. So it only matters for the
only matters for the units.
The things we were talking about with.
Yep. It does not affect
like Snake and stuff.
I guess I'm kind of happy that that's happening. A unit or spell you can remove. You're right, Gorinsky. You're right. I should read. My comprehension is bad today.
Can you? Okay, read it to me because you're confusing me now.
Side action, 1-time power dice. Effect: place 1 status token on target unit you control. Period. Then you may remove 1 status token from a target unit or spell.
Okay, so because it's one-sided, you can only pump units, but you can depump spells, then the spells are definitely hurt by that.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? Like,
because you can put a status token on anything. You just have to have a unit in play. It doesn't matter whether the status token does anything. So, like there will be times where you're just, like I said, you're going to status token your Master Vampire. You're going to status token, your Archosaurus mount, and you're going to remove the Guilt Link counter so that your Archosaurus doesn't get eaten by Guilt Link, right? Like, that's going to happen. And it's going to be a thing that will really take Guilt Link out of being top tier, in my opinion.
Well, Guilt Link was kind of an unfun card to begin with. Like, It's not very interactive.
Right.
And maybe this is a good answer to that. I mean...
Well, it definitely makes poor Vanish not even ever have a place, right? Like, ever. like we're not even growing a card pool where Vanish goes like, oh yeah, I'm getting stronger as the card pool expands. Like, nope, because Vanish was really about like hitting 2 cards in the card pool, and now you just have a better answer on board.
What are we talking about? What is Vanish?
Vanish is the one where when they Guilt Link you, you can vanish, and because they targeted a Phoenixborn, you cancel all the effects. It's here. I'll pull it out because I want to talk about an interesting.
Oh, it's like the counterspell is what it is.
It's counterspell. But it's only for Phoenixborns, right? So here it is, Vanish. You may play the spell after an opponent targets you or your Phoenixborn with a spell, ability, or dice power. Cancel that effect and the remaining effects of that spell, ability, or dice power. So I want to talk about this card for just a second because I found another application for this where I think it's pretty good, but you have to decide whether or not you're going to make this decision. So, and I'm going to grab one other card because I think it competes with one other card in the illusion set, and this came through in my game the other day, and it's also a reaction. Where is it? Where's Particle Shield? Is Particle Shield an action?
Particle Shield is a reaction.
Yeah, it's just in
the one that prevents one and you draw a card.
It's just in the wrong pile on the mod. That's why. Okay, so Vanish and Particle Shield are essentially the same, right? In many, many ways, because what you're trying to do is prevent probably something from dying. But Vanish.
Wait, what does Vanish say?
Well, let me explain here. Okay, so Vanish says you may play this spell after an opponent targets you or your Phoenixborn with a spell ability or dice power. Cancel that effect and the remaining effects of that spell ability or dice power. So it only works if your opponent's targeting a Phoenixborn. There's a specific, like the literal best board sweep in the game, without any doubt. And the reason you play Particle Shields is really to stop board sweepers, like when you're playing Shadowhounds and Illusion. I don't think I would play Particle Shield in many other scenarios outside of that. I
think a card's great.
It's okay. Cole's 100 Blades says, deal 1 damage to target Phoenixborn, period. Deal 1 damage to all opponent's units, period. Draw 1 card. If you have Vanish against Cole and he 100 Blades you, he doesn't do any of this. Like, the whole card is shut off. The entire card is shut off because after your opponent targets your Phoenixborn to deal 1 damage to it, you cancel that ability and all remaining abilities on the 100 Blades. So if Cole is your problem matchup for Illusion decks, Vanish is the better card. Because
I 100% disagree with that, but
well,
I think Vanish
because of Cole's loyalty card and the ability to cancel the ability to sweep your board, I think it's a better card. Your opponent doesn't get a draw card; they don't get to do anything. Like this is
it is better against. Well, how many dice does it cost?
One power.
Okay, so it is better specifically against the card 100 Blades.
Correct, but that's what I'm saying with Cole.
The prevent one stops the Phoenixborn ability on Cole, which will happen to you many more times in the game than the
sure,
100 Blades.
But Cole gets board advantage by being able to sweep wide boards, right? Like Cole.
I disagree with that too, but I mean that is what 100 Blades that specific card does.
But what Cole does, in my opinion, is like even like a 2 health unit like is not safe against Cole because you can 100 Blades and slash the unit, right? So. And if there's multiple units that are they're going to 2-for-1 you there, like you're going to get 2-for-1 or 3-for-1 with 100 Blades, and then they're going to spend 1 more card to kill the 3rd or 4th card in your board. And Cole can change the board state so dramatically just by doing a 100 Blades to a slash. And so again, going back to how do you deal with that? I mean, Vanish is one example of that where you're preventing damage to all your units on play through 100 Blades. This is where, like, to me, Vanish is not a card I want to main board. I want to be really clear about that as we're talking about it. But this is, if Ashes could have a pregame sideboard for matchups, I would consider and I was playing Illusion, I would consider some number of Vanishes in my sideboard to replace either Particle Shields or some other card in my deck for the purposes of protecting the units that I play. And I think that would be kind of cool to see because otherwise I think Vanish has no real place in the meta. But I just wanted to add to this conversation just a little bit about why Vanish is interesting. But anyways, let's.
And I agree with you. I think that card's unplayable. Like,
and it gets even more unplayable as we go into future states of the game because
I think it has the potential to be good in the future when they like it just like you name 2 cards that it's good against in the pool right now that I don't think that I would want to sideboard it against necessarily. So both those cards are good. One of them is a loyalty card. So right now its scope is extremely narrow, but like what if they print like target player discards 2 or something in the next set? We just there may be a time when a card that sees constant play in many decks that's countered by Vanish is good, and then people will play Vanish. But there needs to be a critical mass of things that it answers before people will play it, because that's not a proactive card; it's an answer.
Right, and the only other card that I would say is when your opponent actually Molten Gold's the Phoenixborn, then Vanish works. But again, I just don't think it's worth card space. I don't think it's worth deck space.
Sure. I agree with that right now it is not good, but I think it's not going to get worse as they print more cards. Well, it's going to get better.
Potentially. It just depends on how often they actually choose to target Phoenixborns. And we don't know that for sure. So based on the limited amount of card information we have right now and time being able to stop Guilt Link, like this takes away one potential card that could have answered the Time Magic or answered the Guilt Link, which was a Vanish. And it is what it is. Like, it just is. So it's going to continue to just depend on what other cards get printed that would target a Phoenixborn and whether or not those cards have a meaningful enough impact into those deck strategies to make Vanish become main boardable. And maybe I'll sit back here a year from now and say I was all wrong and Vanish has now become the greatest card in Ashes. But
well, I don't think that will ever be the case because, again, it's an answer.
Right.
So the only thing that's going to make it good is when the things that it answers are good.
Correct. And I just thought it was an interesting, because I hadn't really considered what Vanish does to 100 Blades. But if Cole is a matchup problem for your deck, then Vanish is a pretty good answer if you're playing Illusion.
Barf.
But that's
I declare barf on that.
But anyways, so that was something that I had picked up over the weekend and thought it was kind of interesting. But I think we've kind of really beaten the dead horse with Time Magic's power, right? Like, we know there's lots of implications for it.
My initial assessment is still what I think it is. I think that it is not the best dice power. Sure. It is not the worst dice power, but it is flavorful and cool. It is impactful enough that, it's like there aren't, besides ceremonial for me, there isn't a dice power that I would play that would add incentive for me to play a dice. Like, I don't want to play Illusion because of the Illusion dice power. It adds no percent better or worse for me to play that color. So ceremonial is the exception, where I think the ceremonial power is so good that I'm more likely to play ceremonial because of it.
Mm-hmm.
But if the pool of time cards contains good synergies with status counters, then it is a draw to play time, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's
and I just think we'll have to see what Time's card pool develops, right? And obviously Time's card pool is going to be centered around tokens. I mean, that's what we've been told by Nick and
we can start by seeing it right now.
Right, yeah. So it's a great segue into the next piece. And Cam, I agree with your statement that as an answer to Molten Gold, Vanish is a fine answer. And the question I have, though, before we go too far down that rabbit hole would be, is your deck proactive enough to win even if your opponent were to Molten Gold you twice? Because that's sort of the average value of Molten Gold, because I don't think I want to be holding Vanishes for that singular moment when my opponent Molten Golds me. I just don't. I don't think I would want to. I just want to be doing other proactive things with that card slot. So we'll I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that that's something you have to consider, is my deck capable of winning even if I were to get Molten Gold twice and lose, in many cases, 6 of my, let's just call it, average 17 health. So it comes out to be 40% of my health pool. If 2 Molten Golds will eat up 40% of my health pool, can I still win? Can I do 17 damage faster than 2 Molten Golds? Which, to be fair, 2 Molten Golds is going to be probably 80% of the game. Right? There's still another 20% of the game remaining. And, can you win in 80% of games, before that would happen? And that's what you kind of have to weigh out. But let's talk about the standard bearer, because we got a preview card. I'm super excited about this card. I think it's got some neat implications, particularly in go wide strategies. And
Yeah, it's bad otherwise.
yeah, for sure. It's not very good in anything else. But in go wide strategies, like I was sort of talking to somebody that's a pretty strong Ashes player about this week, and I sort of felt like a lot of the go wide strategies are still ultimately at their core control decks, and that they're not actually aggro decks. And what led me to that was like the lack of success I was having with like side action Noah Wolves and Light Swordsmans. Like being able to flood the board with these things and trying to be aggressive with them just doesn't equate to game
A
wins.
deck like that is almost a combo deck more than an aggro deck because you're just trying to have like one giant turn.
Right. But you have to control the
Um,
board all the way up to that point in order to do it. Right. So like it is a combo, but it's not it feels more like a control deck at its core than it does an actual combo deck. It's like many combo decks are like OTK style decks, like where you're slowly building up the pieces of the combo to the point that then like you might be almost dead, but you get to pull off like the single turn kill kind of effect. That's what I feel like a lot of combo decks are, and Ashes doesn't really seem to have that OTK. It has maybe like a singular round kill type of strategy, but not like an actual OTK. At least not that I've discovered up to this point.
well, yeah, I mean, it would be very, very difficult because essentially and this is why I would consider your like side action 2/1s deck to be a combo deck is because you're just trying to take like one big setup turn and then one big other turn and like attack them for a whole bunch, right? Like
Mhm.
it's it's not like one turn kill, but you just like kind of save up your resources and then like blow all your resources all at once into your attempt to kill them.
Mhm.
And that's a cool idea, but until we get additional actions, it's very difficult to do that because you were playing essentially all the guys that you could play and still attack, where you could like make two wolves and it's light swordsman and attack your opponent in the same turn,
Mhm.
because of the ability on the wolf book to take an additional side action.
Correct.
But that's about it. Like that's about the most actions you could take in a turn, and it wasn't enough, right? Like
Right. And I looked at like potentially trying to play Confusion Spores to just get additional side action help, but it the fact that you have to play the Confusion Spores as its initial side action to get an additional side action, you actually don't get ahead. And
not until the second round of play.
right, exactly. So it just doesn't equate. It doesn't work quite like you would want. So I think the wolf book is better as a threatener. Like you have it on the board, and if there's an opportunity to summon a wolf and do things, cool. But you probably shouldn't be buying into like trying to do what we were doing with the wolf book, because it's just not. It's too difficult to make meaningful attacks before you've been smashed by your opponent in other things that they're doing. Um, yeah, so can you kill a unit with a side and widows/wolves? Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's completely acceptable. And so, like Garinsky in the deck that I was playing with wolves, I was playing Summon Sleeping Widows because like I wanted my opponent to attack into like my Salamander Monk, for example, and I would let the Salamander Monk take a shot, like get blocked or whatever, die. I would Sleeping Widows it, make 2/2/1s, and have still the monk spirit, and then turn around and then summon like two wolves in a like the dream is two wolves in a light swordsman in that scenario, and now you're going ham, right? Like you've got 5 units on the board. It can be explosive, but it's also just like sometimes just a dud, and you hit for 4, and you go, huh, okay, like that's not enough. Like it's not enough to get you game wins.
Up to this point in the game, there has not been like since Reborn anyway, because in 1.0 you could do a lot of wacky stuff with dice recursion.
Sure.
But there's not really a way to get, like, you need two of three things. You need extra resources, extra cards, or extra actions
Right.
to do a deck like that. And there isn't really a functional way to get all, like, two of those three things at once. Correct. In Reborn.
Yeah, so I think the short answer is you need to be doing other proactive things. Like if you go back and watch our YouTube video for my Week 7 AIL matchup where I played Odette and Carl played Noah with no Wolf Book, but just played with Mist Spirits and Shadow Spirits. Like, you just want to be playing Mist Spirits and Shadow Spirits in that kind of deck and pressure that way. And if you do play the Wolf, it's actually just as a supplemental unit to cast in certain situations and not actually be the main strategy behind the deck. And you can do all of the other things like Widows and Shadow Guards and those kinds of things, and those are all good things. But that's not those aren't the primary win con of the deck. They're just like an incremental advantage component of how you play. So with that said, Standard Bearer is kind of changing some of this, but it also suffers from some of the similar problems I think that Noah's Wolf suffered from, where it may not matter, right? Like, at the end of the day, it may not matter. But let's go through what Standard Bearer is, and then we can talk about it in a little greater detail. First off, main action, time, class die, and a basic to play it. Your unit stats are 1/3/1s on your stat line, so 1 attack, 3 life, 1 recover. It has inexhaustible ability, Resourceful 1. When this unit comes into play, place 1 status token on this unit. At the beginning of the player turns phase, place 1 status token on this unit. It has Inspire 1. When this unit is declared as an attacker, you may choose any number of other attacking units up to the number of status tokens on this unit. Add 1 to the chosen unit's attack value for the remainder of the turn. Okay, that's a lot, right? That's a book.
That's got a lot of words on it, but it does some basic things, right? Like, the card that I would compare it closest to, and I think that everybody would make this comparison pretty easily, is Immortal Commander.
Sure. I actually think I brought Huntmaster out because I think Huntmaster is actually closer. The guide effect on Huntmaster
it's similar.
It's similar. But Immortal Commander is fine.
Right. So it's a 1/3/1 for 2, which is not amazing, but very comparable to a lot of units.
Mm-hmm.
There's just a lot of guys with 5 total stats for 2, that kind of look. And its ability is interesting because obviously I was just saying how the time power dice will matter more or less based on how important the status tokens are to the pool of time cards. Well, this is an obvious example of something that uses time counters or status counters.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the greatest thing to do with status counters, but it's not bad either. And it's, it definitely points in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
But what it actually does in most games, I think, is very similar to Immortal Commander, where it's a side action to pump a unit, to pump your team in attack. Because most times if you have this in play, I think that you're likely to use the time power dice to put a counter on it and then attack with a couple guys.
Mm-hmm. Along with the Standard Bearer, yeah.
Right, obviously the Standard Bearer has to attack. That's one advantage it has over the Immortal Commander, is that it gets to attack instead of just exhausting itself out.
I think one of the other things that you can do with the Standard Bearer potentially is give it some sort of bypass on its own so that it can't be blocked. So that way it's safe, to get past opponents and not get blocked by a knight, right?
And we were talking about this before the stream. I mean, the dream is to explosive gross it, right?
Right.
Assuming you have enough guys to take advantage of its power, you have to. The more counters on it you have are meaningless unless you're
You have enough
have guys to pump.
Right.
But if you have a Raptor herder and a random summon and this guy, which is not out of the question.
No.
It's pushing it because you've probably traded cards for something at some point, but it's like a realistic game state that you could have 3 other guys and you get to like play root armor and attack with your team for a lot of damage.
Yeah, I think of Mist Spirits with it too, right? Like Mist Spirits are kind of little guys that you can make a couple of them in one action. Those Raptor Herder and Mist Spirits are the 2 that I think of to support it. I want to real quick.
Widows, whatever, just the things that go wide.
Gorinsky says she's a battery. I agree with that, Gorinsky. Also increasing your attack being utilized on defense against those units that bypass 1 attack units. I'm not sure I know how that's going to happen, Gorinsky. You might have to explain that because it specifically says that you can only use this when attacking. So utilize on defense against those units that bypass 1 attack units.
Yeah, I don't think it works that way.
I don't think so either.
If it does, please.
Yeah, maybe I'm not understanding what the comment means. So, turn isn't round. Nope, turn is just the turn. So it is an offensive card. Like it's intended to be an offensive ability. It's not intended to be a defense.
So
post.
Do me a favor, real quick, and pull out the card Temple Elder. I think is what it's called.
Got it out already. It's right here. Resourceful 1. When this unit comes into play, place 1 status token on this unit. At the beginning of the player's turn phase, place 1 status token on this unit.
Right. So this only gets a status token once a round, right?
The Standard Bearer does, correct. Yeah, they both have the same resourceful like battery growth as to Gorinsky's point. They are a battery. They do charge round over round. I wouldn't expect to see either of these units survive a round. Like I just wouldn't. Like I think you just have to commit to like I'm going to play the Standard Bearer and you're going to do something with it, and whatever round that is what it is. If it lives, wow. I mean that's probably pretty good. But if it doesn't, like not a shocker, right?
Right. I think in general like this is not a card that would draw me to play time.
No.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's exciting that it's like the first real time card we've seen.
Right. I mean, can we talk about how cool the art looks though? Like
it is dope as hell.
It's pretty
like
dope. Yeah. I mean,
it's like one of my favorite arts on all the cards that I've seen.
Yeah,
and this game has great art, but
I mean, I think Jericho looks great as well, but like this card looks so good. I just would love to see like a full art version of this card.
But in general, it makes me excited because I like synergy type decks. Which, obviously if everything is heavy status counters, all the time decks will be synergy decks. And that excites me. I'm excited to play those cards. This card specifically, not as much, but I think that it's better than a lot of guys you can get for 2 dice.
Right. No, I agree with that. And I mean, I think it has a home with Koji as a synergy. I think it has, obviously, Jericho looks like she's wearing Echo's coat. Yeah, sure. I would agree with that. There is a little bit of that Echo feel to it. I wonder if there's some lore to come from that. Like maybe she comes back and messes Echo up. Hard to say. But the explosive growth is obviously like a real consideration synergy card for this, like you said, because if you put the 2
I can't think of a better card to play other than that.
No, because it turns her into a 3/3 for 2 dice, right? I mean,
and it's a side action, so you can do it prior to attacking.
Correct.
And so if your opponent has been sleeping on the like killing your guys because they're not as worried about the threat, All
right.
You can trick them like if they're not going to kill your 1/3 if they don't think you can pump anything.
Here's the Wombo combo. It's not really chat, but it is a Wombo, kind of a Wombo combo. Let's see. Let me grab. You have like the setup is insane for this. Just putting that out there. Like this is probably not going to work in 99% of games, but. I mean, it is a wombo combo, right? So you go double wolf book, spend 2 power dice to make 2 wolves, still have 1 additional side action remaining, play the explosive growth, and you attack for 9 in 3 cards. That's it. That's all I got. I don't know how else you could kind of get away with doing something similar with Sleeping Widows as well. Much simpler version of Sleeping Widows. But that's about it. Most of the time, my opponent knows Sleeping Widows. Sleeping Widows is so telegraphed because of the dice requirements on Sleeping Widows that they're able to usually attack and then side action and kill at least 1 Widow. So you're down to usually just 1 Widow when you Sleeping Widow, and which is just kind of how the game plays. So at least good players don't generally let you have 2 Sleeping Widows. So I think that this is still a safer bet to actually getting 3 2-1s on the board. And essentially turning them into 3-3s because of the explosive growth combo. And you don't use a time power for that at all. But it's kind of expensive, right? Like you're talking 2, 3, 4, 6 dice to make that happen in 1 round.
Yeah, and unless they're like actually at unless they're actually at 9, like it's not even that great.
No, right, exactly. I mean, if they have 2 blockers, they stand in front of any part of this, right, and just like take 3 damage, and you spent 6 dice to deal 3 damage. That doesn't seem very good. So I'll be curious to see. I can't wait to see players play with the Standard Bearer and what it actually does, because I think in a vacuum it's a cool card. I think it's splashy to show it, right? Like to show how they want status counters to interact with the board, and it's definitely more efficient than just the straight like put a status counter on a unit, it gets plus attack, right? Like we've seen out of Snakes and Squall Stallions. But it's also to me less impactful than what it sort of says when you first inspect it, right? Like I think when you first inspect it, it's just okay. I mean, if you're playing other units, like if this is not a masked wolf, but this is a Sonic Swordsman sitting next to it. I mean, who doesn't want to swing with a 4/4 Sonic Swordsman or a Battle Seer with 4/4 Quick Strike, right? Like those are all really good good things because the Battle Seer and the Standard Bearer attack 4/4 Quick Strike, and if your opponent stands in front of the 4/4 with Quick Strike, like there's very few units that survive that and actually get to kill the Battle Seer. So those are the kinds of things. I mean, Master Vampire, also a good target to turn into a 4/4 with stock. But you have to attack Phoenixborn, so again, the stock ability doesn't mean anything, and so yeah, it'll be curious to see like what is the best use of the Standard Bearer, like across the board. Is there a best use for it? I mean, certainly there's explosive plays like I was just talking about, a couple of masked wolves, but do those actually, I mean, in some gameplay states, those actually do hit for 9, right? And that's probably, you're just winning the game.
I think more often, you're just going to have, like, your average go-wide type aggro deck that just generates a couple extra guys over the course of playing its cards through Widows or Raptor Herder or whatever. And if there's other aggressive time cards, then this is an efficient guy in that type of strategy. So like you're not going to build your strategy around Standard Bearer, it's just going to be in your deck.
So Gorinsky says time seems more about building a game state with tokens, but in a game this fast, I don't see anything being built worth it. I'd like to see a card similar to Silver Snake that builds to a tipping point, and we haven't seen it yet. Yeah, I mean obviously
there's another 9 cards you get to see still, is something I would say.
In this particular deck alone, right? And
or 8 cards, sorry.
I think, don't we get 6? We end up with 5 Phoenixborns that are tied to time by the time we're done here. I mean, my understanding
right, and in the long run, you'll get way more even.
Lulu,
but
and I don't know if
in the short
right.
In the short run, yeah, Auric.
Yep.
Uh,
So
you're
I mean,
getting Jericho deck that has 10 cards in it, right? Like,
yeah. So we'll
and
see. I mean, I
one of
think
them is Blink and one of them is Standard Bearer.
I do think that Blink. I do think that Blink synergizes fairly nicely with this kind of play. If you can build up a regular board of units, blink away their defender, and then attack, you get some sort of extra value there. And don't get me wrong, like an extra point or two of damage is not anything to sneeze at for essentially no investment when you talk about like standard bearer as a whole. But
Right, you don't remove the tokens; they just
right.
like continue to build up.
So I do think that there is some consideration there, but I think you're going to have some sort of bypass ability, something that is going to make this play meaningful at the end of the day. And there's a lot of side actions that can enable that, but again, how much are you going to invest to deal 3 damage to somebody? And you have to be mindful of that because I think it's a trap. You can get trapped in this card and making significant dice investments into it that actually don't have an outcome on the game that's positive. So
Right, that's why I think it will be more of like this is a card in your deck,
yeah,
not a card that your deck is built around.
correct. That's very true. Yeah, if you can stick 3 standard bearers, Grinsky, I want to see that game. I do, because that seems pretty good, pretty good. I think you're gonna have a hard time sticking 3 standard bearers in constructed ashes against a competent player. The game is so much about removal, and standard bearer just gets eaten by river scalds. It gets eaten by.
Oh, it dies to everything.
Right.
Like,
yeah, I mean, it just
there's
does.
a lot of 3-power creatures.
Right. So it's. I'm just gonna standard bearer ice buff it. There you go, Rin. Here you go, Rin. Your time to shine. Let's
What
make
is- Oh,
just turn it into a 4 health.
I think Rin already shines and is already great. He doesn't
No,
need
he's not
Standard Bearer.
that Rin's Fury is such a niche card. It's so situational depending on what your opponent's deck is tending to do. So it's kind of tricky. And where right now many of the opponent's decks are aimed at attacking Phoenix Reborns directly through wide strategies. Like your unit still gets exhausted from the Rin's Fury, and that hurts. Like it hurts to have to like stand a unit. So unless you've got an alert unit, then Rin's Fury is probably pretty